Hello, role-playing people, and in this episode we're continuing our investigation of Sabbat, Ritus, and culture. At the end of the previous episode, I mentioned that packs need to be mindful of the calendar, and I did so for good reason. Every year, there are 6 months that are without grand festivities and 6 months that include very important ritus which all Sabbat must observe. We've already mentioned the binding, which takes place on the 22nd of December, so to start this episode we're going to walk through the recurring yearly rites and holidays of the Sabbat. There's quite a few of them, and it needs to be mentioned only 2 of these are currently considered both high holidays and ritus auctoritatis. Some factions believe it's excessive to have 2 high rites dedicated only to holidays, but just as the Vauldery serves a very clear purpose to create and strengthen bonds between Sabbat, these holidays too might strengthen the unity of the sect. Sometime in February, Cainites gather for the sacrificial revel, which is celebrated with tales of sacrifices made for the sect and remembrance of the dead. It is a thoughtful holiday, a time of mourning, actually, and I must say it's interesting to see the Sabbat manifest something besides the savagery and fanaticism they are known for. Remembering and honoring their fallen comrades, sharing tales of both triumph and loss, is unexpectedly sensitive of them, and as we can imagine, this collective mourning probably unites the sect, bringing members closer while diminishing aggression between them. Packs that don't usually see eye to eye might bond over memories of a brother or sister they mutually valued, who died heroically for the Sabbat cause. This is quite probable given how Cainites can be honorific members of multiple packs with which they observe the Vauldery. This holiday was added only in V20, so you can't find information about this one in the Guide to the Sabbat, but as we're going to see in a little while, there is a good reason behind this. Moving on to probably my favorite holiday, the Festa dei Morti. This one used to be held in the 2nd week of April, according to Revised Edition, and is celebrated throughout the entire 2nd week of March in V20. If you don't recognize the name, Festa dei Morti, that is because the writers erroneously called it Festivo dello Estinto, though they wanted to say Festival of the Dead. The way it was explained to me by a scholarly Venetian necromancer, and hopefully I didn't misunderstand, dello Estinto is a singular form, something akin to of the dead one, and festivo, though it can be used as a noun, is also used as an adjective, so it can be akin to saying festive instead of festivity. We don't want to say festive of the dead guy, but festival of the dead. The commonly used terms are Festa dei Morti, or a fancier form, closer to what the writers intended, would be Festa degli Estinti, which would mean Festival of the Extinguished, plural, multiple extinguished. This holiday sees Cainites reveling in their undead natures with nightly Vaulderies, celebrating with fire dances, ritual scarification, reenacting passages from the Book of Nod, various types of contests, hunting challenges, socialization between packs, and an overall indulgence in blood. Monomahy and serious conflicts or rivalries are usually set aside for the duration of the celebration, and no excess is off limits. Now, this festivity was moved to the 2nd week of March, like I said, because in V20, on the 30th of April, Cainites celebrate Walpurgisnacht, a holiday dedicated to the founding of the sect, celebrated with memorable tales and accounts of the Anark revolt and how the Sabbat are the true heirs of this rebellion, unlike the Anarchs who bowed their heads and allowed the Camarilla to walk all over them after they signed the Convention of Thorns. It is on this night children are also embraced in public and ritualistic fashion. Then comes the Ides of Cain in late August during the first harvests, celebrating the murder of Abel and Cain's exile from Eden. This is quite the artistic holiday which invites participants to share their haunting works, from paintings to flesh-crafted sculptures, installations or various performances in Cain's honor. Just because they're not human anymore, that doesn't mean the Sabbat don't make and enjoy art, especially when it revolves around the Dark Father, serving an almost ecclesiastical purpose. The last and most important, most revered high holiday, held on the 31st of October, is what the writers call Pala Grande. This is by far the silliest misnomer because pala means ball, not in the sense of social gathering and dance, but in the sense of spherical object frequently used in sports. A ball. What they probably wanted to say is the grand ball, and that is il gran ballo. I can definitely understand that younger Sabbat would butcher Latin because it's not a commonly spoken language, and some consider it a dead language, though ecclesiastical Latin is currently a sociolect, and both classical and ecclesiastical Latin are still taught in some schools. But butchering Italian too? No, that doesn't make sense from the perspective of the setting, especially with plenty of Italian Sabbat still walking about. So if you want to use the correct versions, Festa dei Morti and Gran Ballo or Il Gran Ballo are the way to go. Linguistic considerations aside, the Grand Ball is a major social event overseen by the highest authority of the city. As mentioned before, this is considered a ritus auctoritatis, so observance and participation are mandatory, even for nomadic packs. This very well-organized gathering will frequently make use of masks and very formal, even regal attire, made by the craftiest Zemitzi or Toreador antitribu. It is usually held in places accessible and inviting to mortals, taking on the form of raves, masquerade balls, festivals, Halloween parties, and the like, which ensures a steady supply of refreshments on hand, as clueless, costume-clad mortals literally party with nocturnal monsters. Gotta love Halloween. So, while the streets are filled with witches, ghouls, and goblins, the Sabbat lure a few people away from the crowds to be prepared for a blood feast. A very distinct blood feast, since this is the only time of the year when the mortal sacrifices are not prepared a few nights in advance, but snatched up on the very same night. This ritual meal only occurs after the main event, which usually starts at midnight. Everyone gets to see a theatrical reenactment of an event from vampire history, myth, or prophecy. Anything from the murder of Abel to a dramatic interpretation of the signs of Gehenna might be on the menu. The audience is invited to participate, especially in scenes of sacrifice or feeding, and any mortal unwillingly participating in the play will probably be disposed of afterwards. This is followed by the blood feast, which is actually mixed with a bloodbath, so that's two other ritus performed at the same time, and the celebration ends with a dance, which usually whips everyone into a frenzy and has them destroying the entire party place. And for the aftermath of this celebration, I will read straight out of the Guide to the Sabbat. Once the night's revels conclude, Sabbat ghouls take care of the cleanup. Any potential loose ends are swiftly dealt with over the next couple of nights through death, the discipline of dominate, or the embrace, depending on the extent of the problem and potential use of the individuals involved. Having just read that, I take you back to what I mentioned in the first episode of this series, that the Sabbat aren't stupid, and also what I mentioned in the previous episode regarding the silence of the blood. The Sabbat also calculate their risks and make sure the mortals don't start fighting back on a massive scale, but they don't pretend to be something they're not anymore, at least in relation to humans. That's why if an experienced pack resorts to shock tactics, shovelheads and such in a Camarilla city, that is by choice. If said pack wants to pass through your city completely unnoticed and just keep some key areas under discreet surveillance, they can easily do that too. And I want to briefly turn your attention away from the high rites and to the Innobilis Ritus of Stealth. Because this is a short one, please allow me to read from the book once again. In the interests of maintaining silence, some packs take extra precautions and invoke favorable omens. In the Stealth Ritus, all participating vampires bite out each other's tongues and spit them into the fire. Though this causes no health levels of damage, the immediate bleeding and healing consumes 1 blood point. The priest or ductus usually bows out so he can issue orders, but some packs have developed complex hand signal systems so they can communicate silently while on stealth-intensive activities. I love the inclusion of this ritus in the write-up because, you see, tongue-biting gory visuals aside, packs also train their stealth, among other skills, and nonverbal communication is essential in a variety of ambush, discreet coordinated attack situations in which the slightest whisper might alert your target to your presence. Since I'm always interested in how these elements can be used in-game, we can imagine Cainites have developed not only a plethora of hand signals, but various shrieks, howls, or barks. We can imagine chromatic visual cues as well. For instance, the Tzimisce sitting at the edge of the conflict perimeter might change its hair color to indicate green, proceed, blue, halt, white, withdraw slowly, red, run. This is very useful when dealing with Cainites on the old Road of the Beast, for instance, who in regressing to animal behavior might not even speak anymore. The Sabbat know how to make use of everyone in the sect, for you see, it's not just experience that teaches us, but necessity as well. Since we're on this topic, allow me to linger a little longer and say sneaky nomadic packs frequently established what are known as Oases in Camarilla domains. After some careful scouting and mapping the neighborhoods out, they find not only the places that might serve as communal havens, but small locations that make for ideal stashes. They might hide weapons here, loot, notes, anything that might be relevant and useful to a pack upon its return to this place, or useful to another pack passing through the city. They usually mark the oasis with visual indicators known only to the Sabbat, neatly hidden within the scenery. V20 divides the Ritus Innobilis based on faction, but in the guide to the Sabbat we are presented with a ton of low rites that are available to all packs. Some of these rites actually serve as social protocols, and to mention a few, we have the Allegiance Ritus, the Martial Ritus, the Spilling of Blood, the Ritus of Thanksgiving, and another one of my favorites, the Welcoming Ritus, which is performed when two packs are forced by circumstance to spend time together. Maybe one nomadic pack has recently returned to the city and is offered haven by another pack, or maybe they're both nomadic packs that meet in passing and must share the same haven. The ritus is quite simple. If performed informally, the pack leaders share blood while their comrades bear witness. If the affair is formal, the individual members introduce themselves by name and rank, also stating their city of provenance so that the packs can get a sense of location and direction. A gift is also exchanged as a show of goodwill and brotherhood, a weapon, a symbolic token, a retainer, or the preserved head of an enemy. This is a good time to plan out a few things, or simply to trade information and news. But this brings us to what I think is the most interesting thing about Sabbat, especially nomadic Sabbat, who don't really see each other or the founded packs for extended periods of time, probably interacting with the wider sect only during the holidays. I'm thinking of their practices of recognition and verification. Suppose you've made a nice temporary haven in a Camarilla city and just got back from a quick hunt when an individual claiming to be Sabbat shows up on your doorstep and starts asking for information, demanding to see your ductus. Obviously, you're not going to take their word for it because you weren't embraced yesterday. After they provide you with a name and title, which in this case is Sister Selena Ash, who declares her loyalty to the Sabbat and states which pack she belongs to, the Twist of Fate pack, you discreetly point to this piercing all members of your pack have in the same anatomical location, through the throat and just above the voice box, and you wait for Sister Ash to show off her own mark of allegiance. She unveils this small purple textile patch adorned with a symbol of the sect. But anyone can carry a textile patch, so you're not sold yet. You flash your pack's hand sign while uttering half a code phrase, which can also be a question with a predetermined answer all Sabbat know, but in this case it's a statement. With your fingers, you form the twisted T and P, which are the initials for your pack, the torn pages, and you say, "One body." The Cainite before you crosses her fingers as if wishing you luck, but after their fingers keep twisting 3 whole turns around one another, unveiling muscle and exposed bone, so much so that they effectively look like fleshy candy canes. The sister goes, "One blood. Twist of fate, like I said, brother. Please, I must speak to your ductus." So now that this person shared both title and name, produced a mark of allegiance, replied to the code phrase correctly, and showed the unmistakable use of vicissitude, you know them to be true Sabbat. In Europe, for example, nomadic packs might encounter each other along the way, but they might not speak any common languages. This is especially true for a game set before the age of the internet, when everyone is connected and English is so widely spoken. Maybe one pack speaks Russian and Hungarian, and the other speaks Italian and Spanish. So this is why the recognition and verification practices are so important, because they also make use of non-verbal visual cues and visual language, which allows sect members to identify each other as such. The same visual language is used to mark an oasis or to clearly delimit a pack's territory within a Sabbat city, and I must say this makes a lot of sense and it fascinates me as player and storyteller. The Sabbat is a sect in profound internal competition and disunity, but still they won't risk unknowingly killing each other. And there are so many hand signs and signals your players can create. It's amazing. Really, because all of these details and guidelines found in the lore, the atmosphere of a Sabbat game is rich with detail. It's thick with ritual, aggression, and fear. And any storyteller can run a newly embraced Sabbat through their first year of unlife with doing minimal game preparation, especially if the player hasn't read up on their lore and they're discovering it for the first time. It's really amazing, though of course the players need to know what they're getting into when playing this sect for sure. So, returning to things I've mentioned earlier, Cainites need to be mindful of the calendar because there are so many holidays to observe, and absenting from just one too many might bring about unwanted attention from the clergy and even the Inquisition. This is where we see just how important the priest is for the pack, and why these Sabbat families should meet up for Esbat and discuss their future plans, because their very unlives might depend on observing these rites and holidays. Some factions, however, consider there's too many of them. The Sabbat should be out destroying the puppets of the antediluvians, not putting on fancy clothes and doing ritual blood parties every month. And this conflict here, from my point of view, is clear proof of the writer's attention to detail and the brilliance of the write-up. Yeah, the writers messed up some foreign terms, but that's something everyone can easily fix in their own game. A bad write-up, however, takes considerably more effort to fix and risks creating ripples throughout the entire setting. But this write-up is brilliant, and it allows the additions to communicate beautifully. Let me explain what I mean. In the Player's Guide to the Sabbat, there are fewer holidays and only 2 of them were considered Ritus Auctoritatis. The Innobiles Ritus were accessible to everyone who knew them, regardless of faction, and there are 3 main factions which hold power within the sect: the Black Hand, the Inquisition, and the Loyalists. V20 beautifully expands on this by saying the primary political contingents of contemporary Knights Sabbat are the ultra-conservatives, the Orthodoxy, the Order of Saint Blaise, and the Loyalists, which makes sense because the Black Hand has never really been a political faction, more like a sect within a sect and a paramilitary faction. And the Inquisition is predominantly there to rid the Sabbat of infernalists and conduct investigations. As such, it should be almost apolitical, at least in theory, as a branch that is distinct from the mainstream clergy, if we can call it that. Some factions gained more traction, and some lost influence, which gives the setting a feeling of continuity and narration, like the metaplot is there and it's ongoing, growing, changing, without really excluding the previous elements of the canon. Instead, it adds new elements in a way that makes sense and enhances the setting. Why are all these new rites and faction-specific low rites in V20? Because the factions are much more distinct and militant now, having their own practices, and because some members of the clergy started advocating for more ritus. The Orthodox faction, as some call them, noticed that rites bring the sect together. The Vauldery alleviates tension within and between packs, while the holidays bring these Cainite families together and let them get to know each other. If they could have more high rites, this would increase discipline and familiarity within the sect, while enhancing the bonds between everyone. Splendid! This not only creates a bridge with previous editions, but also shows that the Sabbat as a sect is learning and changing, and as its members address certain issues, new issues arise which lead to the creation of new factions, and so on. This lore is so nice. I love it. We will explore the political factions in the next episode, but before I go, I want to mention something which has been on my mind for a while, after someone all but accused me of being some freaky V20 purist who thinks V20 is undoubtedly the best edition ever, just because I said some write-ups are indeed better in V20, more detailed and well-rounded. I frequently praise V20 as a compilation edition, and if someone asks me, yeah, that's the one I'm currently playing, but really, when I say I run and play V20, I'm actually referring to all the editions that came before it, especially Revised. When I city build for a Vampire Chronicle, I make use of any and all lore that strikes my fancy, as long as it expands on the world and opens up interesting character stories, because this Anniversary Edition is highly compatible with the previous ones, mechanically as well. So you can swap out rules and systems with ease. You want potence to be considered automatic successes to strength and damage rolls, like in Revised? Done. As long as the entire troop is okay with that, we make it happen. Taking bits from multiple editions doesn't ruin anything, really. It's not going to detract from the experience, and there's so much lore to use. I just enjoy reading Vampire, seeing how the lore and the mechanics have changed, frequently for the better, and seeing just how much work went into these games. So, no, V20 is not necessarily the best thing ever, some weird second coming of Cain, but it does have 30 years of lore behind it and builds upon the previous editions. It is, from my point of view, undoubtedly a great edition, but that is precisely because it stands on the shoulders of giants, as the saying goes. Thank you very much for listening, take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.